Marcus was 35 years old, made a steady $47,000 a year as a maintenance welder, and believed in the simple math of a good life. You work hard, you love your family, and you build something that lasts. On a Tuesday in May at 2:17 p.m., that entire equation was wiped clean. The plant manager, a man with a perpetually tired face and a cheap $150 suit, gathered the third shift crew under the humming fluorescent lights of the factory floor. The air, usually thick with the smell of ozone and hot steel, felt thin and cold. He read from a single sheet of paper, his voice flat, announcing the immediate and permanent closure of the Sparrows Point fabrication facility. The company had been sold. The new owners were moving all operations overseas. Their jobs were gone, effective immediately. The silence that followed was heavier than any piece of machinery on the floor. It was a silence filled with the sudden, terrifying calculus of mortgages, car payments, and grocery bills. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. 22 years he'd been in this trade, 15 at this plant. He looked at his hands, calloused and sure, the hands that could join two pieces of steel into an unbreakable bond. They suddenly felt useless. The drive home to his small Dundalk row house was a blur of brick facades and the glint of the afternoon sun off the Patapsco River. He rehearsed the words he would say to his wife, Denise. "It'll be okay. I'll find something else. We have some savings." He'd been putting money aside, a few $100s every month for a down payment on a bigger house, one with a real yard, for their 5-year-old daughter, Nyla. He had no idea how wrong he was. He pulled his 2012 Toyota Camry, with 187,000 miles onto their street, and saw them immediately. Two large Samsonite suitcases, a matching $300 set he'd bought her for their 5th anniversary, were sitting on the narrow concrete porch. Next to them were 3 cardboard boxes, taped shut. His heart, which had been a cold, heavy stone in his chest, began to pound with a sick, frantic rhythm. Denise was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. She was wearing a crisp, white $250 Calvin Klein blouse and dark jeans that looked new. Her hair, usually a cloud of soft, natural coils, was straightened into a severe, sleek sheet that fell past her shoulders, a silk press that must have cost at least $100. She looked like she was leaving for a business trip, not for good. "What's this?" Marcus asked, his voice rough. "I can't do this anymore, Marcus," she said. Her tone wasn't angry or sad. It was chillingly practical, as if she were discussing a change in utility providers. "I heard about the plant. My cousin works in HR. She called me an hour ago." He stared at her, then at the bags. The speed of it was dizzying. He had only known for 90 minutes. She had already packed. "You heard? And this is your answer? To pack bags?" "My answer is that I am not going to drown with a man who can't provide," she said, the words sharp and clean as a shard of glass. "I told you for years that job was a dead end. I told you we needed more, a real plan." "I had a plan. We were saving," he protested, gesturing vaguely toward the house, the life inside it. "Saving what? Pennies? Marcus, look at this place." She waved a dismissive hand at their home, the modest row house that cost them $1,400 a month. "I want a life, for me and for Nyla, a real one, in a place like Roland Park, not here." The name of the neighborhood hung in the air between them. Roland Park, with its sprawling $700,000 colonials and manicured lawns, was a world away from their reality. It was a fantasy she browsed on Zillow, a symbol of everything he wasn't. "So you're just leaving? You're taking Nyla?" "Nyla is staying with my mother for the week," It's better if she doesn't see all this. A car, a late model white BMW 3 Series he didn't recognize, pulled up to the curb. It was worth at least $43,000. The window rolled down and he saw her friend, Keisha. Denise didn't look back. She walked to the suitcases, her expensive heels clicking on the pavement. I'm not going down with a sinking ship, Marcus. I filed for divorce this morning. My lawyer will be in touch. He stood there, motionless on the sidewalk, as they loaded his life in pieces into the trunk of a stranger's car. He watched the BMW pull away, its red taillights disappearing around the corner. The front door of his house was still open. The silence from inside was absolute. At 3:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, Marcus learned that losing your job wasn't the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing was discovering that the person you built your life with had already valued it, appraised it, and decided it wasn't worth enough to save. He was 35 years old and had nothing. It's a strange thing what a man will do for love and what he will accept in its name. For years, Marcus had operated under the assumption that his love for Denise, and hers for him, was the foundation of their lives. He showed his love not in grand pronouncements, but in the steady rhythm of his days. It was in the lunches he packed for her every morning at 5:30 a.m. before he left for the plant. A turkey sandwich on wheat, an apple, and a small bag of pretzels, a routine that cost about $35 a week. It was in the way he'd spent a whole weekend, and $200 in parts from Home Depot, replacing the leaky faucet in their bathroom sink himself because she'd complained about the dripping sound, while she spent that same Saturday at the mall with her friends. Their home was a gallery of these small acts of service. The bookshelves he built in the living room, sturdy and level, from $80 worth of pine. The small vegetable garden he tilled in their tiny backyard patch, producing tomatoes and peppers that shaved $20 a week off their grocery bill in the summer. He was a builder. It was what he knew. He believed that love was a structure you maintained, patched, and reinforced over time. He had no idea Denise saw it as a property to be flipped. The facade of their domestic normalcy had been cracking for a long time, but he'd been too busy reinforcing the joists to notice. The arguments were always about money, but not about the lack of it for necessities. They were about the lack of it for luxuries. He remembered the argument 6 months before the layoff, about a purse, not just any purse, a $1,200 Louis Vuitton Speedy she'd seen a lifestyle blogger post on Instagram. "Everyone has one, Marcus," she'd said, showing him the picture on her phone. They were in their small kitchen, the linoleum slightly worn near the stove. He was paying bills at their small, $150 IKEA dining table. "Everyone who?" he'd asked, genuinely confused. "Nobody we know has a $1,200 purse." "The people I want to know do," she'd retorted, her voice sharp with a familiar edge of contempt. "People with ambition. People who live in Roland Park or Guilford. Not people who are content to fix pipes for a living." It wasn't the first time she'd used his job as a weapon. He was a maintenance welder, a master of his craft. But in her eyes, the dirt under his fingernails and the lingering scent of metal on his clothes were symbols of his failure. He brought home a steady paycheck, never missed a bill, and was slowly building their savings account, which had reached a respectable $12,000. But to her, his $47,000 salary was a cage. "Denise, that's 2 months of our mortgage payment for a bag," he'd said calmly, trying to inject reason into a conversation that had left logic behind. "It's not a bag. It's an investment. It's about projecting success," she'd insisted. "How are we ever supposed to get ahead if we look like we're struggling?" He looked around their clean, comfortable home. Nyla's colorful drawings were taped to the $800 Frigidaire refrigerator. A pile of her picture books sat on the coffee table. They weren't struggling, they were living. But her definition of living was different. It was a curated collection of expensive objects, a performance for an audience he didn't know and couldn't see. There were other scenes. The time her parents came for dinner, he'd spent the afternoon making his famous braised short ribs, a meal that cost nearly $60 in ingredients. As he served it, her father, a retired postal supervisor, had asked him about work. Marcus spoke with quiet pride about a complex new welding procedure he'd mastered. When he was done, Denise laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. Basically, he works in a loud, dirty factory all day, she'd said to her mother, as if translating a foreign language. But the benefits are decent. The comment hung in the air, coating his accomplishment with a thin film of shame. He saw her ambition in the magazine she left open on the coffee table, Architectural Digest and Town and Country, their glossy pages showcasing sprawling homes with price tags that looked like phone numbers. He saw it in the way she'd look at his hands after he'd spent a Saturday working on the car. "Go wash up, Marcus. You've got grease everywhere." There was no appreciation for the $400 he'd just saved them on a brake job, only distaste for the evidence of the work itself. She lived in a world of appearances, while he lived in a world of substance. He believed in the strength of a perfect weld, hidden inside a pipe, doing its job silently for 50 years. She believed in the shine of a brand name, displayed prominently on a purse. He thought they were building a life together. He was wrong. He was just the scaffolding, and she had been planning her own, more glamorous structure all along, waiting for the right moment to tear his down. The first 2 weeks after Denise left were a thick, disorienting fog. The silence in the row house was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. He'd walk into a room and expect to see her, only to be met with an emptiness that felt like a physical presence. He took care of Nyla, who had returned from her grandmother's house confused and quiet. He answered her simple, heartbreaking questions with gentle lies. "Mommy's on a long trip for work, sweetie." Then the phone calls began, and the fog started to burn away, replaced by the sharp, acrid smoke of betrayal. The first call was from his own mother. "Marcus, what in the world is going on?" "Loretta just called me," she said, her voice tight with worry. Loretta was Denise's aunt, the family's self-appointed matriarch and chief gossip. "She said you packed your bags and walked out on Denise and that poor child." Marcus felt a cold dread creep up his spine. "What? No, Mama. That's not what happened. She left me, the day I got laid off." "Well, that's not the story she's telling," his mother said, a hint of doubt in her voice that cut him to the bone. "She told Loretta you've been distant for months, that you have a temper, and that you just couldn't handle the pressure of losing your job, so you ran away." A temper? He couldn't remember the last time he'd raised his voice. He was the calm one, the steady one. The accusation was so outrageously false, it left him speechless. Over the next few days, the lie grew, spreading through their community like a virus. He got a call from a deacon at their church, a man he respected, offering to counsel him about his responsibilities as a husband and father. The following Sunday, he made the mistake of going to church alone. He thought the familiar hymns and the warmth of the congregation would be a comfort. Instead, he felt 100 pairs of eyes on him. People who had known him for years, who had broken bread with him, now looked at him with a mixture of pity and judgment. He saw whispers exchanged behind cupped hands. During the greeting period, where people usually moved about the pews to shake hands and hug, he was an island. A few people gave him a hesitant, brief handshake, their eyes averted. Most just passed him by. Pastor Evans, a man with a powerful voice and what Marcus had always believed was a compassionate heart, gave him a brief, tight nod from the pulpit, his gaze laced with disappointment. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on his shoulders. He left before the benediction, slipping out a side door. Denise, meanwhile, was constructing her new narrative online. Her social media, once filled with filtered family photos, became a chronicle of her supposed hardship and brave recovery. She posted a picture of herself, her expression somber, with a caption, "Sometimes you have to be strong enough to start over for the sake of your children. Pray for us." The comments poured in. "You're so brave, girl. He never deserved you. A man who abandons his family is no man at all." Then came the texts from her. They were not conciliatory. They were demands, laced with condescension. "I need to get the rest of my things. I'll come by on Saturday. Make sure you're not there. It would be too upsetting for me." "Nyla needs new shoes. They're stride right, $65. I'll send you my Cash App. Don't be late with it. I'm looking at a new place. I've put in an offer. It's important for Nyla to have stability, something you obviously can't provide right now." Each message was a small, calculated twist of the knife. She was erasing him, recasting him as the villain in a story she was writing for a rapt audience. The cruelty wasn't just in her leaving, it was in the systematic, public demolition of his character. He saw a photo she was tagged in, standing beside a man in a crisp suit. The two of them smiling in front of a grand brick colonial in Roland Park. The caption from her friend read, "Celebrating Denise's new chapter in her beautiful new home. #new beginnings, #Roland Park living." The house was enormous, a palace of old money and established success. The Zillow estimate for that property was $720,000. The rage, when it finally came, was a cold, quiet thing. It wasn't the explosive temper she'd invented for him. It was a slow-burning, high-intensity flame, the kind he used to cut through 3-inch steel plate. He sat in his silent house, the stack of unpaid bills on the table, and understood. She hadn't just left him. She was trying to annihilate him. She was salting the earth so nothing could ever grow again, but she had made a critical mistake. She thought the ground she was salting was barren. She had forgotten that Marcus, above all else, was a builder. And he was about to start laying a new foundation, one built not on love, but on cold, hard, irrefutable truth. What she didn't know was that the company she thought had sunk him was about to hand him the very tool he needed to expose her. The outrage accumulated in layers like sedimentary rock. Each new text, each sympathetic but misinformed phone call, each pitying glance was another layer of pressure. He felt himself being compressed, hardened. He started screening his calls, letting the well-meaning but misguided advice from family and friends go to voicemail. He stopped checking Denise's social media. It was poison, and he needed to clear his head. He focused on Nyla, on their new quiet routine. He made her pancakes in the morning, shaped like dinosaurs. He read her stories at night, his voice a low rumble in the stillness of her room. Her presence was his only anchor in a sea of lies. One afternoon, about a month after the layoff, Nyla was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing with her box of 64 Crayola crayons. She was a meticulous artist, her small brow furrowed in concentration. Her beautiful, deep brown skin was luminous in the afternoon light filtering through the window, and her hair, which he had carefully braided into 4 neat plaits with colorful beads on the ends, clicked softly when she moved her head. "Daddy, can you come see?" she asked. He walked over and looked down at the drawing. It was their family. A small figure with a bright pink dress, her. A taller figure with a blue dress and straight black hair, Denise. And a large figure in a green shirt holding her hand. That was him. She had chosen a deep, rich brown crayon for his skin, and for hers. "This is our family," she said, pointing with a small finger. "You and me, and Mommy." He felt a pang in his chest so sharp it almost made him gasp. In her 5-year-old mind, the family was still whole. "That's beautiful, sweetie. You made us look so happy." "We are happy," she said matter-of-factly. Then she looked up at him, her dark eyes wide and serious. "When is Mommy's trip over?" "Soon," he whispered, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. He held the drawing, the paper flimsy in his calloused hands. This was what Denise was trying to destroy. Not just his reputation, but this innocent, perfect image of their family. This was the foundation. This was what mattered. The cold flame inside him burned a little hotter. He would not let her lie be the final story told about their family. He would not let her turn Nyla's beautiful drawing into a fantasy. He would fight for the truth, not with anger and shouting, but with patience and precision. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 6 weeks after Denise had driven away. It was a plain manila envelope, deceptively light. The return address was the corporate headquarters of his former employer, a name that now felt like it belonged to another man's life. He assumed it was just more useless paperwork, some final COBRA notification or a 401k statement. He tossed it onto the pile of mail on the kitchen table and went to start dinner for Nyla. Later that night, after Nyla was asleep, he finally sat down to sort through the mail. He opened the bills first, his stomach tightening at each one. Then he picked up the manila envelope. He ripped it open with his thumb. Inside was not a form letter, but a single sheet of paper, attached to a photocopy of a check. The letter was brief and formal. "Dear Mr. Walker, per our records, this letter serves as confirmation of the final disbursement of your severance package. Enclosed, you will find a copy of the cleared check for your records. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." He glanced at the letter, then his eyes fell to the photocopy below it. It was a cashier's check from the company, made out to Marcus Walker. The amount, printed in neat block letters, made his breath catch in his throat. $38,214.56. It was the severance, the full package, calculated from his 15 years of service. A sum of money that could have been a lifeline. It could have paid their mortgage for 2 years. It could have been the foundation for a new start. He stared at it, a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled him. They hadn't forgotten him. It was real. Then he saw the back of the check, the endorsement. His name, Marcus Walker, was scrawled in a looping feminine cursive that was nothing like his own blocky signature. It was a handwriting he knew as well as his own. He had seen it on 1,000 birthday cards, on grocery lists, on the marriage license that was now a worthless piece of paper. It was Denise's handwriting. His blood ran cold. He felt a strange buzzing sensation in his ears. He looked closer. Below the signature was the stamp from the bank where it had been deposited. PNC Bank, Branch 271. Towson, Maryland. He had never been to Towson in his life. He did his banking at a small credit union branch 2 blocks from their house in Dundalk. Denise, however, had opened an account at that exact PNC branch a year ago because it was near a high-end mall she liked to visit. He stood up from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the linoleum. He walked to the drawer where he kept his checkbook and pulled out an old, canceled check. He placed it next to the photocopy. His signature was short, angular, utilitarian. Hers was flowing, ostentatious, each letter an announcement. There was no question. It wasn't even a good forgery. She hadn't even tried to mimic his hand. She had just signed his name in her own writing, confident that he would never see it, that he would assume the check was lost in the mail. Another piece of bad luck for the man she had left behind. She had stolen $38,000 from him. The betrayal was so immense, so audacious, it was almost sublime. It went beyond the lies, beyond the public humiliation. This was a calculated criminal act. This was grand larceny. She hadn't just left him. She had plundered the wreckage. She had taken the last resource he had to rebuild his life and used it to finance hers. The Roland Park house, the new clothes, the dinners out. It was all funded by his 15 years of sweat and labor. He stood in the silent kitchen, the photocopy trembling in his hand. The fluorescent light above hummed, the same sound as the lights in the factory on the day it all ended. In that moment, the grief and the confusion he'd been swimming in for weeks evaporated. The hurt was still there, a deep tectonic ache, but it was now overlaid with something new, a cold, diamond-hard clarity. He was no longer a victim. He was a man with evidence. The rage was gone, burned out and replaced by an icy calm. He wasn't dealing with a broken marriage anymore. He was dealing with a crime scene, and Denise had just handed him the murder weapon, complete with her fingerprints all over it. He carefully placed the letter and the photocopy back into the manila envelope. He walked to the bookshelf he'd built and tucked it inside a thick book on metallurgy. It was safe. The planning had begun. She had no idea what was coming. The 6 months that followed were a masterclass in strategic restraint. The old Marcus, the man who believed in open communication and honest confrontation, would have called Denise the second he saw the check, his voice thick with accusation. The new Marcus knew that was a fool's move. An emotional outburst would give her time to hide, to spin a new story, to move the money. No, the only way to fight a fire fueled by lies was to cut off its oxygen supply. Silence. He began to play a part. He was the defeated man, the humbled father, just trying to get by. When she called, he answered, his voice deliberately weary. When she texted demands for money, he complied, sending the $65 for Nyla's shoes from his dwindling unemployment benefits. Each transaction was a small, bitter pill, but also another piece of evidence. He kept meticulous records. "Did you ever hear anything about that severance check?" he asked her one Tuesday morning during a tense 3-minute phone call about Nyla's preschool schedule. He kept his voice casual, a man grasping at straws. There was a fractional pause on her end. "No, Marcus, I told you," she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. "You should call them. You need to be more proactive about these things. No one is going to do it for you." "Yeah, you're right," he said, the lie smooth and easy on his tongue. "I'll get around to it." The casual cruelty of her lie was breathtaking. She was coaching him on how to find the money she had already stolen and spent. He hung up the phone, his hand steady. He took a deep breath and wrote down the date and time of the conversation in a small black notebook he'd bought for $3 at a Rite Aid. His days fell into a grueling new rhythm. His primary focus was Nyla. He was a full-time father, and he cherished it. He packed her lunches, walked her to the bus stop, and helped her with her art projects. Their bond deepened in the quiet space Denise had vacated. But after he tucked her into bed at 8:30 p.m., his second day would begin. He converted their small one-car garage into a workshop. He sold his old collection of vinyl records and a few pieces of furniture to afford a used Miller TIG welder, a solid machine that cost him $1,800. The first few weeks were spent practicing, honing his skills beyond the rough maintenance work of the plant. He worked on intricate patterns, on delicate joins, on the kind of artistic fabrication he'd only ever dreamed of doing. The garage became his sanctuary. The hiss of the argon gas, the bright, clean flash of the arc, the smell of hot metal, these were his comforts. His first job was for a neighbor down the street, an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable. Her front porch railing was rusted through. He offered to build her a new one. He spent 3 nights on it, working from 9 p.m. until 2 a.m. The result was simple but elegant, with a small, graceful twist in the steel. It was stronger and more beautiful than anything she could have bought at a big box store. She paid him $500 in cash. He didn't spend it. The next day, he put on his only clean dress shirt and drove downtown. He had an appointment with a lawyer. He'd found her online, a black woman named Avery Franklin, who specialized in family law and financial disputes. Her office was in a modest but respectable building, a far cry from the glass towers of the firms Denise had probably hired. Miss Franklin was in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and her hair in a crown of immaculate twists. She listened to his story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he finished, he pushed the manila envelope across her desk. She took out the photocopy of the check and studied it for a long time. "Her handwriting?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus said. "And you've never used this bank branch in Towson?" "Never." She leaned back in her chair, a large leather piece that creaked softly. Her rate was $450 an hour, a fact that had made his stomach clench, but as she spoke, he knew it was worth it. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice calm and precise, "this is a textbook case of forged endorsement and bank fraud. It's a felony. The lie she told your church and family is slander. The emotional distress is significant. We have a case, a very strong one." She laid out the plan. It was not about revenge. It was about accountability. Step 1, do not alert her. Step 2, gather all related evidence, the texts, the social media posts, his own written timeline. Step 3, he needed to build his own financial stability. A judge is more sympathetic to a man who is fighting for his future, not just punishing his past, she explained. That night, the purpose of his 3 a.m. welding session shifted. It was no longer just therapy. It was his legal fund. It was his new life. He started posting pictures of his work on a simple Instagram page, the railing for Mrs. Gable, a small decorative gate, a set of custom shelf brackets. A local contractor who specialized in renovating historic homes in Federal Hill saw the page. He was impressed by the clean welds and the artistic detail. He commissioned Marcus to build a complex curved staircase railing for a $1.2 million renovation project. The contract was for $15,000. Marcus worked with a feverish intensity. Nyla's innocent question one morning broke his heart and strengthened his resolve in equal measure. She padded into the kitchen while he was making coffee, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice thick with sleep, "why do you work when the moon's out?" He knelt down and hugged her. "Because Daddy's building something new, sweetie. For us." 6 months passed like this, a blur of fatherhood by day and fire-breathing creation by night. He landed 2 more contractors. His garage was filled with the raw materials of his comeback: long sticks of cold-rolled steel, grinding wheels, and blueprints. His bank account, which had dwindled to almost nothing, slowly began to climb. He paid Ms. Franklin's retainer. He bought a new set of tires for the Camry he was building. Silently, patiently, piece by piece. While Denise was living in a house of cards funded by theft, Marcus was forging a future out of solid steel. The lawyer's advice was the bedrock of his strategy. For 6 months, Marcus built his case as carefully as he built his railings. He compiled a 3-inch binder, a meticulously organized testament to Denise's campaign of deception. The first section contained a high-quality scan of the endorsed check and the cover letter from his former employer. The second section held printouts of every text message she had sent, each one a small, sharp jab of condescension or a demand for money. He had highlighted the conversation where she'd advised him to be more proactive about finding the money she had already stolen. The third section was a collection of screenshots from her social media and the posts of her friends. There was the photo of her in front of the $720,000 Roland Park Colonial, time-stamped just 3 weeks after she cashed his severance check. There was her post about starting over and being brave, which had garnered over 200 sympathetic comments. He printed every single one. The final section was his own sworn affidavit, a detailed timeline of events starting from the moment of the layoff, written in his clear, simple prose. It was countersigned by a notary public. The binder was a cold, heavy object, dense with facts. While the binder grew, so did his business. The $15,000 staircase railing for the Federal Hill renovation was a masterpiece. The contractor was so impressed, he put Marcus on retainer, guaranteeing him a steady stream of high-end, custom fabrication work. Word of the Dundalk welder spread through the small, tight-knit community of Baltimore restoration specialists. His work was his reputation: clean, strong, and honest. By the end of the 6th month, he had $22,000 in a business account, earned entirely through the sweat of his 3 a.m. labors. He had replaced more than half of what she had stolen, not with a windfall, but with skill and grit. He met with Avery Franklin one last time to plan the final stage. "We have 2 objectives," she said, tapping the thick binder on her desk. "First, accountability for the theft. Second, reclamation of your good name. We will achieve them simultaneously. A coordinated strike is more effective than a prolonged battle." The plan was simple and devastating. On a designated Tuesday morning, almost exactly 6 months to the day Denise had left, he would execute 2 actions. First, he would walk into the corporate headquarters of the bank and file a formal fraud affidavit. This would trigger an internal investigation that would inevitably lead to her. Second, at the same time, a courier service would deliver a package to Pastor Evans at their old church. The package would contain a letter from Miss Franklin and a curated selection of documents from the binder: the check, the timeline, and the texts. "She has built her new life on 2 pillars," Miss Franklin explained, her voice devoid of emotion: "a fraudulent financial foundation and a fraudulent social narrative. We are going to kick both pillars out from under her at the exact same moment." The night before the strike, Marcus couldn't sleep. He didn't go to the garage. He sat in the living room, the house dark and quiet, and looked at the drawing Nyla had made, which he'd framed in a simple $15 black frame from Target. The smiling brown faces drawn with the pure, uncomplicated love of a child. This was why he was doing this. Not for revenge, for justice. For the right to be the man in that picture, the strong, happy father holding his daughter's hand. On Tuesday morning, he woke up before his 2:45 a.m. alarm. He put on a new dark gray polo shirt he'd bought for $40 and a pair of clean jeans. He felt a strange sense of calm. At exactly 9 a.m., he walked through the revolving glass doors of the PNC Bank Tower downtown. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and quiet ambition. He was directed to the fraud department on the 14th floor. A kind-faced woman in her 50s listened to his story and examined his copy of the check. "This is her signature, not yours?" she asked, her expression serious. "That is correct," Marcus said. "And you are willing to sign an affidavit to that effect under penalty of perjury?" "Yes, I am." As he signed the paperwork, he imagined the courier across town, handing a similar package to the church secretary. The fuse had been lit. The rest of the day was surreal. He picked Nyla up from school. They went to the park. He made spaghetti for dinner. He was just a father, living his life. He was playing dumb one last time, but now the play was for himself, a way to keep the gravity of the day at bay. The first call came at 4:52 p.m. It was an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. A minute later, his phone buzzed again. It was Denise. He ignored it. Then a text message appeared. "Marcus, call me now. It's an emergency." He felt nothing. He just continued to wash the dishes. His phone buzzed again and again. A cascade of voicemails and texts began, a real-time record of a world collapsing. He didn't listen to them yet. He would wait. He would let the consequences marinate. He dried the last dish, turned off the kitchen light, and went to read Nyla a bedtime story. The chaos could wait. His peace could not. Later that night, long after Nyla was asleep, he sat at his kitchen table and finally played the messages. The first voicemail was from Pastor Evans, his voice strained and confused. "Brother Marcus, I received a package from your attorney. I think we need to speak, urgently." Then came Denise's. He listened to them one by one, a clinical observer documenting a subject's rapid decline. Voicemail 1, 5:03 p.m. Her voice tight, annoyed. "Marcus, what is this? Pastor Evans just called me, talking about some package you sent him. What did you do? Are you trying to embarrass me? Call me back." Voicemail 2, 5:25 p.m. The annoyance escalating to anger. "I can't believe you would do this. After everything, you're trying to turn the church against me? With a bunch of lies? I needed that money for Nyla, for her stability. You were just going to waste it feeling sorry for yourself." Voicemail 3, 6:14 p.m. The anger replaced by a high-pitched panic. "The bank just called me, Marcus. The bank? They froze my account? They're talking about an internal fraud investigation. What did you do? You told them I took it? You're trying to ruin my life." Voicemail 4, 7:30 p.m. Her voice cracking, pleading. "Okay, Marcus. Please just call me. We can fix this. It was a mistake. I was going to pay you back, I swear. I just needed a little time. Don't do this to me. Think about Nyla. What will this do to her?" Voicemail 5, 9:47 p.m. Open, sobbing hysteria. "My life is over. Richard just saw the email from the bank. He's kicking me out. He called me a thief, a common criminal. Marcus, they're going to press charges. I could go to jail, please. I'll do anything. I'll give it all back. Just please make it stop." He deleted the messages one by one. There was no triumph in it, only a grim, quiet finality. The fire was out. All that was left was the smoke and the reckoning. It was close to 3 a.m. when he heard a car slow down on the street outside. He was in the garage, the door open to the cool night air, sketching a design for a new project. He glanced up. It was a white BMW 3 Series. Denise. She was just sitting there, the engine idling, staring at the garage. The single, bright halogen bulb illuminated him at his workbench, surrounded by the tools of his trade, the raw steel, the finished pieces leaning against the wall. The sparks from a grinder weren't flying. It was a moment of quiet creation. He was not a man defeated. He was a man at work. He saw her face, pale, in the dashboard light. It was a face stripped of all its condescension, all its arrogance. It was the face of someone who had gambled everything on the belief that he was worthless, and had just discovered, 6 months too late, the true value of what she had thrown away. He didn't wave, he didn't glower. He simply held her gaze for a moment, then turned back to his blueprint. He had work to do. After a long minute, the BMW quietly pulled away and disappeared into the darkness. The consequences of Denise's actions cascaded with the swift, brutal logic of gravity. Her downfall was not a single event, but a series of collapses, each one a direct result of the pillars she had built her new life upon. Avery Franklin had been right. They had been kicked out from under her, and the entire structure came crashing down. The first consequence was financial. The bank's fraud investigation was swift and merciless. They had her signature, a transaction record from a branch she frequented, and Marcus's sworn affidavit. Within 48 hours, her accounts were not just frozen, but seized. The bank's legal department informed her that they would be pursuing criminal charges to recoup their federally insured losses unless she made immediate restitution for the full $38,214.56. Faced with the choice between a payment plan and a felony charge that carried prison time, she capitulated. The life of luxury she had financed with Marcus's severance was foreclosed upon in an instant. The second consequence was social and domestic. Her new partner, Richard, the finance executive who owned the $720,000 Roland Park Colonial, was a man who valued appearances and reputation above all else. The revelation that his new live-in girlfriend was embroiled in a bank fraud investigation was intolerable. The accusation of theft was bad enough. The sheer messiness of it was worse. He was a man who eliminated liabilities. As she'd cried into the phone, he had packed her things, her $2,400 Burberry dresses, and her collection of designer shoes, into the same Samsonite suitcases she had placed on Marcus's porch 6 months prior. He gave her 1 hour to have a friend pick them up. She was homeless, cast out of the very life she had betrayed Marcus to obtain. The third consequence was communal. Pastor Evans, after speaking with Marcus and reviewing the evidence, was horrified. He was a good man who had been manipulated, his trust weaponized. He called a private meeting with Denise and 2 of the church's senior elders. It was not a public shaming, but a quiet, somber accounting. Faced with the irrefutable proof, the check, the timeline, her own text messages, her narrative crumbled. There were no more lies she could tell. She was formally asked to step down from her leadership role on the church's hospitality committee. The truth, now sanctioned by the church leadership, spread through the community not as gossip, but as a sad, corrected record. The whispers that had followed Marcus were replaced by a wave of quiet support for him and a profound, disappointed silence for her. She lost her audience, and without an audience, her performance of victimhood was over. Forced to liquidate her assets, she sold the new white BMW 3 Series at a loss of nearly $8,000. She used that money to hire a low-cost attorney and put a deposit on a cramped, $1,200 a month apartment in a rundown complex near the county line. She went from a Roland Park Colonial to a 1-bedroom walk-up with stained carpets and a view of a parking lot. The court-ordered restitution plan was aggressive. She was to pay back Marcus, through the court, at a rate of $800 a month. It was a financial anchor that would weigh her down for the next 4 years. Marcus, meanwhile, felt none of the elation he might have expected. There was only a quiet, somber sense of order being restored. He had not acted out of a desire for her to suffer. He had acted out of a need for the truth to be honored. He had Miss Franklin draw up a new custody agreement. Given Denise's unstable living situation and the clear evidence of her character, he was granted primary physical custody of Nyla. Denise was given visitation rights every other weekend. He did not fight for more. He did not want to punish her. He wanted to protect his daughter. The scales, which had been so violently tipped, had finally been balanced. Her life, built on a foundation of lies and theft, had proven to be as unstable as she had imagined his to be. His life, which she had left for dead, was now being built on a foundation of solid steel forged in the dark, quiet hours of the night. He had lost his marriage and his job, but he had reclaimed his name, secured his daughter, and discovered a strength he never knew he possessed. 1 year later, the acrid smell of ozone and hot metal was no longer confined to a cramped garage. It filled a vast 5,000-square-foot fabrication shop in South Baltimore. The space was bright, clean, and organized. Sunlight streamed through large industrial windows, illuminating the powerful machines and the raw materials of creation. Marcus, now 36, stood at a large drafting table reviewing a blueprint. He was no longer just the Dundalk welder. He was the lead fabricator and design consultant for Chesapeake Restoration and Build, one of the most respected construction firms in the state. The owner of the firm, the same contractor who had given him his first big break with the $15,000 staircase, had seen the genius in Marcus's work. He hadn't just seen a welder, he'd seen an artist, an engineer, and a problem solver. He offered Marcus a full-time salaried position at $85,000 a year, plus a 10% commission on any project that used one of his original designs. Marcus had his own team, his own budget, and the creative freedom he had only ever dreamed of. He was no longer just joining steel, he was shaping the aesthetic of the city's most beautiful spaces. His life with Nyla had found a new, happy rhythm. He had used the money from his business and the first few months of his new salary to buy their own home. It wasn't a sprawling colonial in Roland Park. It was a slightly larger, beautifully maintained brick row house in Hampton, a vibrant neighborhood known for its local shops and strong sense of community. It cost him $240,000. It had a small but sunny backyard where he had built a magnificent garden box, and Nyla, now 6, was growing her own patch of strawberries. Her room was painted a bright, cheerful yellow, and her walls were covered in her own artwork. Her deep brown skin glowed as she ran through the sprinklers in the summer, her laughter echoing in their small, perfect yard. Their life was not luxurious. It was rich. The final, quiet resolution came on a Saturday afternoon. Denise was dropping Nyla off after a weekend visit. She looked different. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt. Her hair was back to its natural coiled state. She looked tired, but the hard, brittle edge she once carried was gone. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked, her voice soft. Marcus nodded, stepping out onto the porch. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her eyes fixed on the ground. "For everything. For the money. For the lies. There's no excuse for what I did. I was lost and scared. I thought wealth was something you had to grab, something you had to look like you had. I destroyed everything for that idea." Marcus listened. The anger he once felt was long gone, replaced by a kind of distant sadness. "I know," he said simply. He saw the flicker of hope in her eyes, the question she was afraid to ask. He had to be clear, not for her, but for himself. "I forgive you, Denise. I do. For my own peace, I have to. But what we had is over. This is my life now." He gestured back toward the open door of his home, where he could hear Nyla chattering away to her dolls. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I know. You've built something good here, Marcus." "Yes," he said. "I have." She left without another word. It was not a reconciliation. It was a closing statement. The true epilogue, the moment that defined his entire journey, came a few weeks later at Nyla's school. It was What Our Parents Do Day. The classroom was filled with firefighters, doctors, and office workers. When it was Nyla's turn, she walked to the front of the room, her beaded braids clicking softly. She carefully unfolded a piece of drawing paper. It was a new picture of her family. This time it was just 2 figures. A small girl with a bright yellow dress and a tall, smiling man standing next to her. The man was wearing a blue work shirt and a funny-looking helmet, and all around him were bright orange and yellow sparks, drawn with furious energy. She had used a deep, beautiful brown crayon for his skin, and a lighter brown for her own. Her father, a proud black man, a creator. She held up the drawing for the class to see. "This is my daddy," she announced, her voice clear and proud. "His name is Marcus. He's a builder. He builds things with fire to keep people safe and make houses beautiful." Marcus, watching from a small chair in the back of the classroom, felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with a welding torch. A single tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek. He wiped it away, a smile spreading across his face. We spend so much of our lives being told that wealth is about what we can acquire, what we can show off, what we can buy. We're told it's in the price tag of a car, or the address of a house. But that day, sitting in a tiny chair in a first-grade classroom, Marcus understood the truth. Real wealth isn't about what you can take. It's about what you can create from nothing. It's not about the house you live in. It's about the love you build inside its walls. It's the strength you forge in the fires of your darkest hours, and the quiet pride you feel when your child looks at you and sees not a provider, but a builder. What have you built when no one was watching? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about the strength we find when we lose everything.